Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. And, thanks for watching the videos that I've been putting up. I've been seeing a lot of new views and a lot of visits to each and every one of those videos lately. So, yeah, just thanks for coming in and stopping by. You're always welcome. So, without further ado, let's talk about what you're going to be building today. And it's going to be an RSS Reader that is what you're seeing on the screen. So let me just demo what the final product looks like. So if you want to search for something interesting, let's do something that's been in the headlines lately, and that is Donald Trump. He's a very interesting character. So let's go here and then search for Donald Trump. Hit search or enter. And then as the results come back, we'll be able to render it in our collection view. And then as you tap into the reader, let's see, that one probably doesn't work. Okay. Upon clicking in on one of the items in the collection view, you can view in more detail what the feed is comprised of. In this case, it's talking about the late Court Justice Scalia and some other information related to that Donald Trump RSS feed. So let's get into what we want to talk about in terms of tackling this project. So before I talk about what an RSS feed is and how we get the RSS feed from the internet, let's talk about the starter project that I have created right here in the screen. And it's called RSS Reader Starter. And it's going to be available in a GitHub link down below. So what is in this project? Now I'm going to run it, and it's going to take over that RSS Reader pane right there. And this is a application that contains one UI collection view controller, and it registers two cells. One is called the header cell, which contains a text field that you can type in, a search button. Next, you have the cells below it, which I'm calling entry cells right now. Don't really concern yourself as to what the names are, but it contains one UI label. Let's go to the cells. Okay, so the entry cell up here contains a title label and a content snippet text view, which is on top of each other. And right at the very bottom is a divider view that shows the horizontal bar at the very bottom. That bar doesn't come for free in UI collection view, so we have to add it in manually. And next, let's talk about how I'm adding these constraints in here. I've created a extension method on UI view, and it's called add constraints with format. And this allows you to easily just add constraints like, what's a good one? Okay, this one right here. So title label, content snippet view, and divider view, which is this entry cell right here. It's specified by V0, V1, and V2. So V2 is the divider view, V1 is the text view, and then V0 is that sample title 1 up there. And I don't have to do very much, but add in the constraints in one simple line like that. I've used this code in production applications, so definitely consider like just straight up copying and pasting it and then use it in your own projects. It's been really helpful. Whew. Okay. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to write for this project. Okay. Let's see. Going back to what we're calling the search feed controller. Let's say I type in Trump right there and hit enter. At the very bottom in the logger, it says performing search for Trump, please wait. And that method that's being executed is called perform search for text. And all we have in this method is printing out that exact line with the search text being replaced inside of that print statement. So, okay, let's move on to how we're actually going to get this RSS content from the web. Now, Google has a free API that they provide, and we're just going to use that API that's available online. Okay. Moving to Chrome, we're going to get to this website, I promise you. We're going to search for RSS feed JSON. Don't worry so much about what JSON is just yet. And click into JSON Developer's Guide. And then make sure to read the documentation. It's actually really helpful. But in the interest of time, let's just scroll down to the command and take a look at what Google has provided for us. So copy and paste that, hit that, and go into the terminal. And then if you're not used to the terminal, it's fine. We're not going to use it very much. So executing that gives you a return value of this blob of text. And of course, it doesn't make any sense to you because, if you don't know how to read JSON, it's really hard to read. Now, the way we manipulate that to print out something that we can actually read or is legible, let's copy and paste that last bit and then open up a new tab and just copy and paste into the browser. Now, this is the exact same text we saw in the terminal. So how do we make sense of it? Now, if you go to chrome.google.com/webstore, this is where you can install Chrome extensions. And you might be using Safari or Firefox. Don't use those for this tutorial. Just use Chrome. It's so much helpful, or so much more helpful. And what you're going to want to search for in the store is an extension called JSON View. So it's the first one that comes up. If you click onto it, you're going to be able to install it. I already have it installed. So I'm just going to go and enable it for myself. Let's see. Enable. Okay. Enable. I'm going to hit refresh. And then you hit refresh after you install the extension. That's how you get it to work. And now we have something that's very legible and, easily consumable as a human being. Now, how do you read JSON data? You can think of JSON as a tree structure, and it has a root node. In this case, the root node is response data. And opening that guy up, we have response data's children, and each children can also potentially contain its own children. Might be a little confusing, but you'll get used to it. It's actually a really, really easy data structure to read. Now, what we're interested in taking away from this feed are the title property, content snippet, and URL. So let's first think about how to get this data into our iOS application, right? Now, we need to reach out to the internet via it's typically called a GET request from our app, and then pull down the entire string and then kind of put it together into our app so that we can present it onto the view. Okay. Oof. Now, the question is, how do we do that? So let's go back to the application, and in perform search for text, we want to call ns URL session, shared session, data task with URL, just like the last one. And then we need a URL, and that URL is going to be the URL in Chrome. So I'm just going to call it URL string. What's that? And then I'm going to construct the actual URL with that string, like so. And then URL, get the bang or the exclamation mark because we have to unwrap it. It's an optional thing. A Swift optional. It's not that you can do it optionally. So let's call it data response error. Okay. Now when the request is completed, it'll go into this block and execute this line 44 bit of code. Now we're going to do if error is not equal to nil. We're just going to print the error if there's an error. and we're going to return and just do nothing if there's an error. That's typically how you handle it. You might want to do something interesting with error. In this case, let's just hop down, and then, so the interesting bit is this data parameter. And in order to show you what it is, let's construct a string out of it. So string data. So data NS UTF-8 string encoding. And then let's simply print out the string here. Ooh. Talking is pretty tough. Takes a lot out of your vocal cords. Okay, so let's do the same search again like what we previously did, and hit Donald. Let's see, I think I have to do Trump just like that. Okay, so nothing's happening. It's just saying performing search, right? And we need to use the resume method on that data task. Probably doesn't make sense. It should be called start and not resume. I don't really know exactly why Apple decided to call it that. Okay. Trump, enter. And then, as you can see, we've been able to successfully pull the data from the internet with this request, and then we've been able to take the string, or take the data, the raw data, and then construct a string out of it. Okay, next, we're going to want to do something with the string, not just print it out. We're going to want to take out the entry values of this JSON data. Now, in order to make sense of the JSON, we need to do something called serializing it. And I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is because it's hard to explain. I'm just going to write out the code, and then it's going to make sense as you see it working. So data, as JSON reading options. Okay. So I'm gonna just use the underscore, get rid of it. So this error here is saying that NS JSON object with data is potentially going to throw an error. Because if it's like if the string is purely like ABC, it's not going to be able to parse this as JSON because it's not a valid format. So in order to get rid of that compile error, we're gonna wrap everything in a do block. So let's just do that guy. No. Let's just bring back this, and then okay. Now we're gonna call try on that, and then we're gonna catch the error like so. Next, we're gonna print the error if it ever throws an error, and that's all we're gonna do. So now, let's see what we want to do next. We want to be able to use this JSON bit, and if we go back to Chrome, notice that response data is the root node of our JSON data. You can access that by using JSON, the subscript parameter. And then we know that it's actually an NS dictionary, or everything that gets serialized turns into a dictionary. And that's because a dictionary is like a key value. And in this case, it's string to string. It's you'll get used to it as you use it more and more. Okay. And then in order to access the entries, what we do is let's say, call entries dictionary equals response data entries as in this dictionary. Let's see that. Okay. And then you notice that this is actually an array of entries. That's what this bracket is. Like, it's actually an array of entries. So let's see, it should actually be that. And let's see, entry dictionary. In entries dictionaries. Is it entry? I think I'm calling it wrong. Entry dictionaries. Yeah. Entry dictionaries. Let's see, is that right? Okay, we need to unwrap that optional because this produces an optional dictionary array. And then let's get the title out of the entry dictionary. Okay, and then let's just print out the title like that. Okay, run that guy. Hopefully it doesn't crash. You never know with these things. Okay, let's go Trump search. Okay, so it's saying that it's not finding the optional properly. And entries dictionary. Let's see, what is response data? Okay, response data is nil because I was talking while I was typing, and we actually want to use response data. So let's see. Okay, awesome. Now if we look at, actually let's get rid of the string print, and then type in that, cool. So official blog. Okay, that makes sense because we actually want to replace that right there with the actual search text, which is passed into this method here. Conveniently set up like how I want it to work. Oh. All right. So Trump, we get Trump gets backing, all this interesting stuff on such an interesting man. Okay. Now, so this is what it looks like. You can replace the Q parameter with just the text that you want to search, basically. So if you wanted to do not just Trump, but Donald Trump like that, it will help you add the %20 for a space. It's kind of important, but not too important. Now, okay, now that's what we have. We have our data being parsed into our app as JSON, and then we're able to fetch the unique properties inside of each entry pretty easily, if you ask me. So let's do this entry dictionary, that, and then let URL like that, and then that is the URL title and the content snippet. We're not going to use a link because it's not that valuable or useful to us right now. And we're going to create entries. Now, one thing that came with the starter project is the entry struct that contains title, content snippet, and URL. And the reason why we're seeing these like sample items in the collection is because I've instantiated these 3 entry items, and then the collection view obviously looks at that and like prints out title 1, title 2, title 3. Okay. Now we want to replace that data with the things that are coming in through the search. In order to do that, we will reinstantiate our entries like that. And then, okay, it's going to need a self because we're inside of a, instead of a block that's being executed on a background thread. Don't worry about that. Just add the self in. And then we're going to append. And then we just do entry, title, content snippet, and URL. these need to be strings. Okay, and then this also needs the self. Okay, this means that we're reconstructing our entry's data source, and then upon exiting out of the loop, we will call reload data, and then it's going to reload the collection view with each new entry item. Okay, and it's going to crash like so. If you search for this reason keyword, it's going to say blah blah blah, this method may only be called from the main thread. That means we have to execute this reload data on the main thread. So in order to do that, we will call dispatch async dispatch get main queue, hit enter to get the block to autocomplete. Call that. Don't worry so much about why you have to do that. Just remember, if you're on a background thread, you need to get back onto the main UI thread to execute a UI change. Okay, so trump like that, and voila, we get each entry filling up the list with the title and then the content snippet in the second line. Yeah. Now the next question you have is, okay, we have these bold tags and these other like funny HTML syntax inside of the text view and the title labeled. So how do we get rid of the HTML syntax? Well, iOS, I can't remember which version of iOS, but you can actually instantiate this HTML type of text and use it as your attributed string inside of your text view. Now, that might or might not be confusing. So let's show you how do we change that piece of text into HTML. Okay, HTML. So going into a cell for item at index path, we have access to the cell now. And then we're going to do HTML equals entry dot content snippet. Okay, I think it's this. Okay, we're going to use something called ns attribute string, and then okay, data, right? So our data, and then we're going to do, so what is data? Equals entry dot content snippet data using encoding. So this NS Unicode. NS, yeah, Unicode string encoding. So I'm cheating a little bit. I have some things off screen. And then so we use data, and then we have options. So let's create options. NS document, and then NS HTML text document type. Options, all that good stuff. I think that's just nil. Okay. Let's see. What is that complaining about? That? No. Let's see, what is it complaining about? Okay. Now this is also going to require a do block like that. And then HTML text equals try that. Okay, and then we can set the text like so. Print error. Whew. Okay. Yeah, some of this stuff is like super confusing. But once you get used to it, you know, things that you have to learn on the job pretty much. Okay, now that the HTML is out of the text view, which is the second, the bottom view, we still have it on the top. The title label still contains HTML because, I mean, I'm just having it being bolded to show visual distinction between the two views. Okay, now the next question is, why is the content snippet being cut off like that? And for example, you only see one line of text, but it's actually like a couple of lines of text. So 15 hours, and then it likes to say, but many of the villagers are more proud of, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's not showing that piece of text in this cell. So there's two things that you can do to fix this issue. And we're going to use the smarter of the two methods to resize the cell. And this method is pretty much going to rely on the system to auto-size the cell based on what's inside of it. So it'll handle whatever's in there, and then it's just going to expand the height so that everything fits within the cell. Okay, now how do you do that? You have to do two things. You have to specify an estimated item size inside of the layout or for the layout of your collection view. And then I think you can pretty much make this anything you want, I think. As long as it's maybe the width of the view. And then the interesting part is you have to override or provide a method for your cell, and that method is preferred layout attributes fitting attributes. So let's get rid of all this stuff here, and I'm gonna show you what I mean. So you can do attributes equals layout dot copy as UI collection view layout, like that. And then you essentially set, well, let's just return it for now. You want to, this method provides you the ability to set the frame on the window. And I'm just going to type it out before explaining too much. Let's see. I'm just gonna, I can't remember exactly what it's called here. Okay. So it's called System Layout Size Fitting Size. Wow. And then this is called UI Layout Fitting Compressed Size dot height. And then attributes dot frame dot height is that height. It's actually size dot height equals desired height. Okay, now that we've provided that method, let's run it again, and you'll see that. See Trump. You'll see that it auto resizes. Okay. Whew. Cool. Now, another important part is you have to set the context, the text view to scroll enabled equals false. Otherwise, this thing's not going to work. It's not going to be able to recalculate its size. Okay. Moving on. So before we get into how to get the feed detailed information from the actual items in the list, I want to fix two potential issues that will cause your application to crash. Now, the first issue is on line 55, and if we get a null object for this dictionary entries object, we will crash when it comes time to execute line 57 and we're trying to unwrap a null object, which is entry dictionaries. So to easily protect ourselves from this happening is to unwrap it in an if statement like that. And then that allows us to easily loop into the entry dictionaries without unwrapping it. Because if entries is null, or if response data entries is null, it'll continue to, it'll look at line 55 and then say, okay, it's null, and then it'll execute line 64 thereafter. Now the second issue is we want to actually search text that actually contains space inside of the query. And what I mean is this search query right here that returns us this response data set, we want to do something like this, where there's a space between Donald and Trump, and then we hit enter, and you see the %20 gets filled in automatically for us by Chrome. And to do that in iOS, we need to let me first show you what happens. Like if you provide a space inside that text, you just get a crash. So to fix that crash, we do string by adding %encoding with allowed characters, and the allowed characters will be URL query allowed character set. And then let's unwrap that. So now if we search Donald Trump, the app doesn't crash, and we just get the list like how we had before. Okay, moving on to clicking on a specific item and then getting the actual feed. The way we do that is we go back to Google's documentation and we go down to look at the load. So first we were looking at the find, now we're looking at the load API. This API is different in that the word find above is changed to load here, and the query we provide is the actual RSS feed that we get inside of this URL or each individual entry. And now we will change that URL to load and then copy and paste this guy as the query parameter and then just hit enter. And then you get a new data set that is also in JSON that represents this specific feed from npr.org. And what we're going to have to do is to create a new controller that will contain a collection view, and it'll also contain the fetching of this data set using the same data task with URL. But looking at, instead of just entries, we have to look at feed and then entries. Okay. So given that that is actually a lot of work to be done inside of a short tutorial like this, I'm going to just create the controller and then let's see. Whoops, no, we want this. Okay, so the controller's here. I'm just going to copy and paste over what I have in my completed project and then show you how it actually works. Okay. The last thing we have to do is provide the did select item at index path method. So when we click on the collection view, we will instantiate a controller like that, and we use the collection view layout initializer with the flow layout like that, and then we, let's see, instead of the URL, looking at our data source, let's see, index path dot item, no, dot item dot URL. So that gets our entry, and then we have to provide a question mark because it's an optional, and then we push it onto the navigation controller by calling that true for animated. And next, let's try to run that. Oh. All right, let's search for Donald Trump, that, and then click on that. We get the entire feed that is provided in that query. Cool. Now this RSS Reader is in blue. It's kind of bothersome. So as a bonus, I will show you how to change the tint color like that. Pretty easy stuff. Dibs? No. Donald Trump. That. Okay, now the back button is in white as you would hopefully expect. Cool. Now, going back to the copy and pasted code, you can see that fetch feed is being called after the entry URL is being set. So that set happens here on line 114. And then fetch feed is called with this URL that we had constructed in Chrome, essentially this part. And then we concatenate the whole URL with the entry URL, which is this URL right here. And then upon success of getting the data from the internet, we parse the JSON very similarly to what we did before, and we get the title, and instead of content snippet, we get content instead. So if we go forward, we get content instead. And inside of content is a blob of HTML text that shows the entire feed. If you're familiar with the other apps that are on the App Store that show RSS feeds, this is pretty much how it's done. Okay, good stuff. And so when I was talking earlier about calculating the size of these cells, I noticed that when I was automatically calculating the size of the HTML text, it wasn't doing it properly. So I had to provide a manual method to calculate the size of that HTML block. And starting at line 105, we get the HTML text yet again. And then we actually calculate the size of that text using bounding rect with size, given an actual size and some drawing options and a context. So when you're using this method, you have to account for what's on top, bottom, left, and right of the text view. And when you account for that, you provide this method with that size. So you can actually calculate the height of it given a proper width. Now that's a little more advanced in how it works. It's not too complicated, but definitely look at how this is being used, because you're definitely going to need it if you work on production applications. And that's about it. Now, this RSS feeder wasn't too difficult to build, hopefully. And we've learned a lot of things inside this tutorial. We first learned how to, we reached out to the internet to get JSON data using data task with URL from NS URL session. And then we were able to parse the JSON looking into the response data root node and getting the entries and looping through the entries, creating our data source, and then reloading our collection view. Next, we learned how to resize the cells automatically so that the height changes with the text view. And in most cases, it works out perfectly to adjust itself. And then we learned how to use the URL to actually get the feed itself. So a lot of stuff, definitely a harder topic than what I've done earlier. So if you don't know how to use UI collection views, definitely look at the video in which I'm doing the to-do list in collection views. That tutorial, I show you exactly how all this stuff works. All right. Finally, I think that's it. Hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Definitely leave a comment or question if you have any. And I'm going to put the link on the final project that is going to be on GitHub, so you can download it and play around with it, along with the starter project, so you can have a kind of a reference as to what the starting point is. Now, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a very good day. Bye.